This beautiful girl is named Soon-hee. She once had a harmonious and prosperous family. Unfortunately, her father, Dae-hoon, was killed by evil men. To save their lives, the family was forced to flee. During their escape, her older brother, Yeon-cheo, was shot. Her father, disregarding his own safety, told Soon-hee to take her nephew, Ru-seung, and flee first. But just then, a gunshot rang out behind her. Her father fell to the ground. Her mother, Yeon-ae, wept uncontrollably. Dae-hoon took out his mother's ring and gave it to his wife, telling her to go to Korea and find his father. But before he could say his father's name, he was shot and killed. Soon-hee, carrying the young Ru-seung and her mother, endured countless hardships to escape to Korea. Yeon-ae, overcome with grief, was admitted to the hospital as soon as she arrived in Korea. Under Soon-hee's careful care, she finally regained consciousness. During their escape, they had lost all their money. Soon-hee asked her mother, "Isn't Grandpa in Korea? Let's go find him." Yeon-ae said, "Your father died before he could tell me your grandfather's name." She cried bitterly. Soon-hee pulled out the ID card she had just obtained to comfort her mother. "We will survive." The mother and daughter hugged each other and wept. What they didn't know was that grandfather Dae had become a wealthy man in South Korea. Dae was now an elderly man. Every time he thought of his family, he was filled with sorrow. He had even hired people to search for his relatives, but an irresponsible broker told him that during the war, everyone in his village had been killed. It turned out that when Dae was young, he had left his newlywed wife, Sun-yuk, to join the army. He never returned for decades, but he didn't know that when he left, his wife was already pregnant with Dae-hoon. Sun-yuk told her son on her deathbed that his father's name was Dae. The only memento they had was the ring on her finger. On the day Dae was shot, he gave the ring to his wife, but Yeon-ae didn't know her father-in-law's name. Now, with only a ring, it was difficult to find her grandfather in this unfamiliar place. To survive, Soon-hee changed her name to Mijin. She knew that this family now needed her to hold it together. With a firm resolve, Soon-hee vowed to give her mother and nephew a home in Korea. She worked tirelessly, taking on multiple jobs, and finally managed to settle into a basement apartment. Over a year passed in the blink of an eye. Soon-hee had saved enough money to buy an apartment. She told her nephew that tomorrow, it would finally move into a home with sunlight and hot water. The next day was moving day. The three of them were so excited they couldn't sleep all night. Soon-hee never imagined that when they arrived at the location with their furniture, the new apartment was already occupied. She asked the man how he dared to move into her home. The man told her she had been scammed. This was a foreclosed property. They had purchased it through legitimate channels. Soon-hee couldn't believe it. She said the real estate agent was a close friend of hers. How could she have deceived her? She immediately went to find the agent. The neighbors told her that the family had moved out the previous day. Desperate, Soon-hee rushed to the police station to report the incident. However, the police told her that without sufficient evidence, the only option was to gather evidence and sue the real estate agent. Feeling helpless, Soon-hee sat on a chair, unsure of what to do. Just then, her mother called, crying and saying that the driver had thrown all their furniture on the ground. What should they do now? Soon-hee was afraid her mother would worry. She told her mother to wait there while she rushed over. Just as she hurriedly left the police station, she bumped into a man. Soon-hee was afraid of getting into trouble again. She packed her things while apologizing. Watching her leave, the man felt that the girl before him was both familiar and, but he never imagined that this destitute girl was actually his first love, Soon-hee. By the time Soon-hee reached her mother, it was already late. The helpless mother and son were soaked in the rain. The mother suggested to Soon-hee, "Why don't the three of us just end our lives together?" Soon-hee persuaded her mother, "For the sake of our deceased father and brother, no matter how difficult or tiring it may be, we must endure." To survive, Soon-hee had no choice but to take her mother and nephew and live under a bridge. However, after only 2 days, the park manager came to evict them again. Soon-hee pleaded with him, promising they would leave once they found a place to stay. Though the manager felt sorry for them, he had no choice and someone had complained. Just then, Ru-seung's teacher walked over. He assured them he would take the three of them away that day. After the manager left, the teacher asked Soon-hee why she hadn't contacted him. Soon-hee lowered her head and said she was sorry for disturbing him. With the teacher's help, they arrived at a large building. Soon-hee didn't know that the entire building belonged to her grandfather. In the end, Soon-hee's cousin Dae-ho, out of respect for the teacher, let them move into a warehouse to live. Thus, they finally had a home. To recover the money they had been scammed out of, Soon-hee entered the law firm in the building. To her surprise, the lawyer's name was Django. Wasn't he your first love from North Korea? Just then, Django walked in. He looked at Soon-hee and felt like he had seen her before. Django asked Soon-hee to sit down and talk, but Soon-hee was afraid he would recognize her and hurriedly made an excuse to leave. As Soon-hee was getting into the elevator, Django followed her and told her that if she was worried about the lawyer's fees, he could represent her for free. Soon-hee said thank you and ran away. In fact, Soon-hee had already recognized Django. Django only felt that Soon-hee looked familiar but didn't recognize her. Additionally, the name on the documents Seung-hee submitted to the law firm was Mijin. Seung-hee comforted herself that she must have seen it wrong. How could Django be here? But then she secretly followed the man, watching his expression as he spoke. Seung-hee was convinced that the lawyer in front of her was Django. She thought back to the times she had spent with Django. Seung-hee instantly shed tears. She knew that she was not worthy of the Django she saw now. In fact, in Django's heart, he also had a vague feeling that Mijin was Seung-hee. To confirm his guess, early the next morning, Django went to find Seung-hee at the address she had left. Seung-hee was afraid that Django would recognize her mother. She nervously closed the door and asked Django what he wanted. Django told her that he had come to help her. Seung-hee thought that Django had recognized her. She refused Django's offer on the spot. But Django told her, "As far as I know, you seem to be in urgent need of help. That money is very important to you." Seeing this, Seung-hee no longer refused and accepted Django's help. After looking at the documents, Django said he could help her get back half of the rent. Seung-hee was very grateful. To express her gratitude, she bought a bento box for Django. Just as she was about to leave after sticking the note on the law firm's door, Django was standing behind her. Seung-hee felt embarrassed. After seeing the note, Django realized that Seung-hee had come to bring him a late-night snack. In the office, Django asked Seung-hee if she knew someone named Yeon-cheo. Upon hearing the name, Seung-hee almost choked. Yeon-cheo was her deceased brother. Seung-hee pretended to shake her head and said she didn't know him. Django asked her, "You're from Pyongyang. How could you not know them?" Seung-hee replied irritably, "Even though I live in Pyongyang, does that mean everyone in Pyongyang has to know them?" Django's question had hit a sore spot for Seung-hee. Seung-hee got up and left. Django felt a little guilty. He thought he had said something wrong, but he didn't know that Seung-hee hadn't gone far. Seung-hee knew that Django hadn't forgotten her. She just didn't want Django to see her in her current state. Django couldn't sleep after returning home. Seung-hee's image kept popping up in his mind. He didn't understand why she had reacted so panicked when he was just asking about someone. Could this Mijin be Seung-hee? The next day, Django saw Seung-hee sending Rusun to kindergarten. He said he'd give them a ride. Seung-hee wanted to refuse, but Rusun got in the car without hesitation. Seung-hee had no choice but to follow him into the car. On the way, she heard the child call her auntie. Django breathed a sigh of relief, but he still felt that this Mijin was the woman who had taken Seung-hee away. After Seung-hee dropped her nephew off at kindergarten, Django bluntly asked her if she was Seung-hee. Seung-hee pretended not to understand. "Are all Korean men like this? Harassing women? If you keep suspecting me like this, I'll find another lawyer." Seung-hee's words made Django doubt his own intuition again. He had already dismissed the idea. But the next morning, when Django saw Seung-hee's nephew with her mother, he finally realized that Mijin was Seung-hee. To prevent Seung-hee from avoiding him, Django played the music box tune they loved as children. When Seung-hee came home from work, Seung-hee was drawn to the music. She held the music box and was lost in thought. At that moment, Django was quietly standing behind her. Hearing the sound, Seung-hee turned around and saw Django. She didn't want to face Django looking so disheveled. Django stopped her. He asked Seung-hee why she didn't tell him. Seung-hee said she had her pride. "You didn't even recognize me. Why should I acknowledge you?" Django apologized. "The reason I didn't recognize you is because you changed your name." Seung-hee replied that it was normal not to recognize her in Seoul, because I've changed a lot since then. For Seung-hee, everything felt like a dream. Django saw that his girlfriend's family was living in a cramped warehouse, so he lied and said he had found them a new place to live. After settling his girlfriend's family, Django finally told the truth. They were actually living in his family's house. Upon hearing this, the stubborn Seung-hee was furious. Django hurriedly explained that he lied because he was afraid that telling the truth would lead to rejection. However, Seung-hee felt that Django looked down on her. Django said that wasn't what he meant. Seung-hee refused to listen to his explanation. Finally, she angrily declared that she would move out the next day. Seeing this, Django revealed their dire financial situation. This left Seung-hee speechless. She knew she had no means to find a new place. Django scolded her for only thinking about her own pride. He reminded her to consider her mother and nephew as well. Seung-hee lowered her head in resignation. Even now, Yeon-hee still doesn't know that Django's family were their neighbors in North Korea. Considering her mother's pride, Seung-hee didn't tell her the truth. Ever since Django met Seung-hee, he wasn't interested in any of the potential marriage partners his mother Samsu had introduced him to. Samsu didn't know that her son had always been in love with Seung-hee. That day, Django picked Seung-hee up from work. Coincidentally, his aunt saw them. She then told her sister-in-law that Django was with a woman. Samsu thought she must have mistaken someone. Later, the aunt saw her nephew leading the girl straight home. She hurriedly told her sister-in-law about it. Samsu ran out. Sure enough, he saw Django and Seung-hee. She asked her son who the girl was. Django didn't know how to explain it to his mother. Just then, his aunt stumbled in. Since Seung-hee had been to the law firm, the aunt recognized her. She asked Seung-hee why she was there. Seung-hee didn't know how to respond. Then the younger sister-in-law told her sister-in-law that she was the North Korean girl who had been scammed out of her rental deposit. At that moment, Yeon-hee recognized Samsu. She asked her daughter what was going on. Before before Seung-hee could speak, the two mothers recognized each other. They had been neighbors in North Korea over a decade ago. At that time, Seung-hee's family was very wealthy, while Jang-go's family was just an ordinary household. Jin Seo couldn't understand why Seung-hee's family was living in her backyard. When mentioning Seung-hee's family, Jang-go's grandmother, Da-rae, remembered clearly. Back then, their lives were very prosperous. How had they fallen so far? Chin Se asked her son if he was doing this because he wanted to date Shengsi. Jong-gao explained that Shengsi's older brother was his friend. He had kept it a secret because he didn't want to see his friend's family living on the streets. Chin Se scolded her son for letting them stay in their home. Her aunt agreed that it wasn't appropriate for them to stay there. Grandmother added that back then, just talking to North Koreans could get you arrested. Jong-gao couldn't bear to listen anymore. He told his family that when he was young, he and Shengsi's brother had been in the same classroom. Later, Shengsi's father and brother had both died while defecting from North Korea. Shengsi had been struggling to make ends meet with her mother and nephew. Just a few days ago, a scammer had swindled them out of all their savings. As a friend, how could he stand by and do nothing? After John Gao's explanation, the grandmother and aunt didn't say anything else, but the mother felt uneasy. She always felt that John Gao and Seung-hee were dating. She didn't want her son to associate with such people. On the other side, Yeon-ae blamed her daughter for not telling her the truth. Seung-hee told her mother that they had nowhere else to go. Yeon-ae recalled how Chin Se had looked down on her and could only swallow her anger. Soon after, Chin Se found Yeon-ae and asked them to move out as soon as possible. Yeon-ae said she didn't want to live here either. Once the rental deposit comes through, we'll move out immediately. That day, Seung-hee saw Jang Gao on a date with a rich girl. Although she felt uncomfortable, she knew that her current situation was not good enough for Jang Gao. Seung-hee secretly resolved to earn enough money to pay the rent and move out of Jang Gao's house as soon as possible. But soon he didn't know that Jang Gao had agreed to meet the rich girl because he had promised his mother if he wanted Seung-hee's family to continue living there, he had to stay away from Seung-hee and follow his mother's wishes to date the wealthy woman. At the restaurant, the wealthy woman Hira chatted cheerfully, but Jang Gao's mind was filled with thoughts of Shengsi. He had no interest in continuing the conversation with Hira. He then directly told Hira that they weren't compatible. Hira asked him why. Jang Gao said their interests didn't align. Hira said she could change. Jang Gao said he didn't want to take things further with her. Hira says she doesn't care either. She then leaves angrily. After being rejected, Hira goes to a nightclub to get drunk. Unexpectedly, she meets her true love there. This scruffy bearded man is exactly her type, but she doesn't know that he is Jiangsu, Jang Gao's younger brother. Eventually, the two end up together after drinking. The relationship between Jang Gao and Seung-hee grows closer. Yeon-ae wants to move out as soon as possible. She went to a restaurant to find a job as a waitress. No matter how hard it was, she could endure it. One day, on her way home from work, she saw a girl. She immediately rushed over and started fighting with her and shouted at her to give the money back. But not only did she not get the money, she was beaten up by the other girl and ended up at the police station. When Seung-hee and Jang Gao arrived, Yeon-ae told her daughter that she had mistaken a girl for Mijin. Whenever the name Mijin is mentioned, Yeon-ae becomes very sad. It turns out that over a decade ago, Yeon-ae had adopted a homeless girl named Mijin and raised her as her own daughter. On the day they fled, Mijin had stolen all their money. That's why Seung-hee and her mother had been living in such dire straits with their nephew. Seung-hee blamed her mother for acting so impulsively. Yeon-ae insisted that she had definitely seen Mijin. Seung-hee comforted her mother, saying, "We've managed to survive all these years without that money, haven't we? I'm willing to give up." Yeon-ae took out the ring and told Seung-hee to go find her grandfather. Seung-hee said, "Korea is so big. Where are we supposed to find him? Don't cling to this ring anymore." Yeon-ae complained that she couldn't bear to live like this anymore. As a member of a once heroic family, she couldn't accept being discriminated against. Seung-hee begged her mother to stop. If she had such thoughts, she shouldn't have come here in the first place. Seeing this, Yeon-ae was speechless. On the other side, Deok-shiin spent a fortune hiring people to search for his family. However, he received news that his family had all perished in the war. The old man was already very old, with no one to inherit his vast fortune. He decided to make his nephew Da-ho his heir. Actually, Da-ho had once helped Seung-hee's family. Deok-shiin didn't know that Seung-hee's family was now living in dire straits. Meanwhile, Mijin was squandering the stolen money, pretending to be a wealthy woman and mingling with the upper class. However, she had yet to meet a wealthy young man. That day, the unfortunate Mijin finally encountered Yeon-ae. Upon seeing Yeon-ae, she was so scared she couldn't speak. Out of guilt, Mijin ran away. Yeon-ae followed closely behind. This time, she didn't mistake her. The woman in front of her was indeed Mijin. Mijin broke free from Yeon-ae and ran into the bathroom. When Yeon-ae arrived, she saw Mijin, who was still in shock. Yunnae then cornered her in the bathroom. She called her daughter and said she had caught her enemy, Mijin. At that moment, Mijin arrogantly told Yunnae that she had already spent all the money she had stolen. Moreover, that money wasn't her foster father's, it was money he had extorted from the people. Upon hearing this, Yunnae was so enraged that she opened the bathroom door. She wanted to strangle this woman to death. In the struggle, both of them fell to the ground. To escape her adoptive mother's clutches, Mijin used the heel of her shoe to strike her adoptive mother's hand. Taking advantage of her adoptive mother's momentary lapse, Mijin seized the opportunity to escape from the bathroom, but as soon as she stepped out, she bumped into Seung-hee, who had just arrived. Seung-hee, worried about her mother, temporarily let Mijin go. Seeing her mother covered in blood, Seung-hee felt deeply heartbroken. Yunnae urged Seung-hee to chase after Mijin. By the time the mother and daughter stepped out of the door, Mijin was already nowhere to be seen. Seeing her mother covered in blood, Seung-hee couldn't care less about that slut Mijin. Seeing her mother's pitiful state, she swore to catch Mijin with her own hands. But at that moment, they had no idea that not long ago, Mijin had met a manga artist. The manga artist was named Heedong. He was none other than Deokchien's grandson. Mijin knew that Heedong had a crush on her, but she had no idea about his true identity. Today, she had encountered Seung-hee's family. She realized that trouble was brewing. Her top priority was to find a powerful ally to protect her. So Mijin thought of Heedong. Watching Heedong enter the mansion, Mijin couldn't believe her eyes. Since Hira was rejected by Zhang Gao, she had become acquainted with his younger brother, Jiangsu. Although Jiangsu had achieved nothing in life, Hira loved him deeply. Upon learning that Hira's mother was forcing her to arrange a marriage with a wealthy young man, Jiangsu immediately took Hira to meet her mother. Hira's mother Changjae and her grandmother Kiwoo were both curious about who Jiangsu was. Seeing this, Hira quickly introduced Jiangsu. Jiangsu then introduced himself. Upon hearing his name, Changjae asked Jiangsu if he was Zhang Gao's younger brother. Jiangsu said yes. My mother's name is Chin Se. When Changjae heard the name Chin Se, he wasn't just familiar with her, they were practically sworn enemies. Changjae then dragged Jiangsu to his house and started cursing at his family, calling them all thieves. Grandma saw her grandson being beaten and rushed forward to wrestle with Changjae. After everyone calmed down, Changjae accused Chin Se of coveting their family's property. Chin Se was confused. She asked her son what had happened. Jiangsu told his mother that he was just dating Hira. The entire family was shocked. Grandma asked Jiangsu if the woman he had slept with before was Hira. Jiangsu said yes. Changjae fainted upon hearing this. After sending her away, the family discussed the matter. Grandmother believed it was fate. Chin Se said that the deeper Jiangsu got involved, the more he would get hurt. After all, Changjae didn't even think highly of Jiangsu, who was a lawyer. How could he think highly of Jiangsu? Grandmother said it wasn't necessarily so. The younger sister-in-law thought they shouldn't interfere and let Jiangsu handle it himself. Grandmother agreed with her daughter's suggestion. If Jiangsu married Hira, it would be his good fortune. On the other hand, Jiangsu clearly loved Seung-hee, but he was always very reserved about his feelings. Because Chin Se didn't think highly of Seung-hee, so Seung-hee didn't have much confidence in her relationship with Jiangsu. Just then, Jiangsu's junior sister Jinya appeared, which made Seung-hee feel burdened. Sure enough, Chin Se thought Jinya's family background was prestigious. This is the kind of daughter-in-law she has always wanted. For her son's happiness, she decides to drive Seung-hee's family away. Seung-hee feels wronged, but she doesn't know who to talk to. On the other side, Mijin hires someone to investigate Heedong. As expected, Heedong is indeed a rich kid. After learning about his background, Mijin launches a fierce pursuit of Heedong. Looking at Heedong's mother's photo, she immediately took notice. The next day, Changjae was robbed by thugs as soon as he got out of the car. In the midst of the crisis, Mijin rushed forward and drove the thugs away. Changjae, still shaken, was deeply grateful to her. This was how Mijin first entered the mansion. To avoid rousing suspicion, she didn't go inside. When Changjae asked for her phone number, she casually said it was no big deal. After exchanging a few polite words, Mijin said she had something to do and hurriedly left. Her kind deed made Changjae and his mother look at her in a new light. However, this was only the first step of Mijin's plan. Her goal was to gain Changjae's approval. Under Mijin's careful planning, Heedong soon started dating her. However, in order to successfully marry into a wealthy family, Changjae's consent was necessary. Mijin then began the second step of her plan. She returned to Heedong's house and pretended to call him, asking him to come over for dinner in half an hour. Unaware of her intentions, Heedong gladly agreed. He had no idea that this was all part of Mijin's plan. Timing was crucial. Mijin arranged for Heedong to run into his grandmother by chance. Kiwoo recognized Mijin. To show her gratitude, she invited Mijin into her home. Just like that, Mijin became their honored guest. The group then chatted about everyday matters. 20 minutes passed quickly. Mijin guessed that Hee-dong was about to come downstairs. She got up and said she had to go home. Chon-jae took out a wad of money and said it was a small token of his appreciation. Mijin knew she couldn't accept the money. Just then, Hee-dong appeared. He was very happy to see Mijin. Seeing his son so enthusiastic, Chon-jae curiously asked if they knew each other. Hee-dong said Mijin was his girlfriend. The mother and grandmother were shocked to hear this, but Chon-jae couldn't possibly let a woman of unknown origin become his son's wife. In her eyes, her future daughter-in-law should be the daughter of a wealthy family. Although Mijin had saved her life, she couldn't compromise her son's happiness. She decided to ask Mijin out to find out more about her, but the scheming Mijin had already guessed Chon-jae's intentions. Before Chon-jae could ask, she introduced herself first. She told Chon-jae that she was an orphan. Chon-jae then asked her which university she attended. Mijin replied that she had never attended university. Upon hearing this, Chon-jae's expression immediately changed. She stated that although Mijin had saved her life, there was no way she could ever marry Hee-dong. Finally, she warned Mijin to cut off all contact with Hee-dong immediately. Regarding Chon-jae's words, Mijin had already anticipated them before the meeting. In order to marry into a wealthy family, how could she back down so easily? Later, Mijin pretended to be pitiful in front of Hee-dong. Hee-dong began to show off to his mother. He decided not to go home and stayed with Mijin. Seeing his son not coming home, Chon-jae anxiously begged Mijin to persuade Hee-dong. At that moment, Mijin secretly rejoiced. Only by grabbing this man could she become the wife of a wealthy family. Chon-jae couldn't reach his son, and Mijin ignored his messages. Kiwoo analyzed that all of this might have been Mijin's plan. They decided to teach this woman a lesson. Chon-jae hired someone to find Mijin's residence. A sudden ringing at the door made Mijin panic. She saw Hee-dong's mother and grandmother on the surveillance camera. This was also part of her plan. Mijin put her phone on speaker and placed it on the table. She then went to open the door. Originally, Chon-jae only pulled her hair and scolded her, but Mijin played a desperate card. She ruthlessly scratched her own face. Her goal was to make Hee-dong force his mother to agree to their marriage. Hee-dong rushed to the apartment and saw the injured Mijin. He was furious. Seeing this, Mijin pretended to faint to make Hee-dong feel more sorry for her. At the hospital, Mijin acted as if she were sad. Hee-dong felt uneasy seeing his girlfriend's haggard appearance. Little did he know that it was all an act by Mijin. Soon, Hee-dong took Mijin home. Just then, they ran into Grandpa and Dad, who were coming home from work. Hee-dong introduced Mijin as his girlfriend. Grandpa was very happy to hear this. Hee-dong then told his family that he wanted to marry Mijin. Everyone was very surprised. Hee-dong asked his family to approve their marriage. Chon-jae immediately opposed the idea. Hee-dong tried to argue, but Chon-jae interrupted him, saying that Mijin's family background was not suitable for Hee-dong. Hee-dong accused his mother of disfiguring Mijin's face. His grandmother and mother were astonished. They insisted they hadn't done it. Hee-dong said he had heard everything that happened on the phone. Now, no matter how his grandmother tried to explain, it was impossible to clarify the situation. With no other option, Daho apologized to Mijin on behalf of his wife and mother-in-law. Seeing this, Mijin deliberately said she had also done something wrong. Seeing his girlfriend so upset, Hee-dong tells his family that he will move out of the house starting today and will only return after they agree to their marriage. He then takes Mijin and leaves the house. Deok-shian scolds Chon-jae for going too far. His words clearly show his approval of Mijin. A few days later, Chon-jae brings his mother to visit Mijin. Seeing her beloved son so caring toward his girlfriend, she finally agrees to his decision. Thus, Mijin married into the wealthy family as she had wished. But on the day of the wedding, Mijin saw Yeon-ae among the guests. She was so scared that she fainted. The family rushed Mijin to the hospital. Chon-jae thought his wife was pregnant, but the doctor told him the patient had fainted due to excessive stress. At that moment, Mijin dared not open her eyes. She was afraid to face her foster mother. At that moment, Yeon-ae and Seung-hee also arrived at the hospital lobby. Seung-hee was furious and wanted to confront Mijin. Yeon-ae was afraid of causing a scene and hesitated, but Seung-hee refused to let it go. Mijin recalled the scene at the wedding and felt terrified. She asked her family to leave and wanted to be alone. She couldn't understand why her foster mother had come to her wedding. Just then, Seung-hee entered with her mother. She slapped Mijin across the face. Mijin knelt before her adoptive mother in fear, begging for mercy. Seung-hee demanded to know why she had stolen their money. "We were so poor we had to beg on the streets." Hearing this, Yeon-ae shed bitter tears. Mijin, seeing this, begged her adoptive mother to forgive her. To preserve her current status, she was willing to degrade herself. herself. Watching the mother and daughter shed tears, Mijin played the victim, saying she had no choice but to steal the money. Seung-hee accused her of stealing money that was their livelihood. Mijin said she knew she was wrong and begged her adoptive mother and Seung-hee to spare her. The man she was marrying today knew nothing about this. She begged Seung-hee and her adoptive mother to leave first. Mijin wept uncontrollably. Yeon-ae wanted to forgive her, but Seung-hee said she would never let it go. Desperate, Mijin grabbed Seung-hee and said she would write a guarantee letter. In the end, the mother and daughter forgave Mijin, but they never imagined that this woman would almost cost them their lives in the future. On her first date as a member of the wealthy family, Mijin prepared a lavish breakfast for her new family. Date was very happy. The cooking skills of the new daughter-in-law allowed this elderly man who had left his hometown to taste the flavors of home once again. Date asked Mijin where she learned to cook. Mijin said she was an orphan and had taught herself. Chang-jae was very unhappy upon hearing this. He silently cursed her for being scheming. After dinner, Chang-jae blamed his mother for being too enthusiastic. Kyu advised his daughter not to be too picky. She thought Mijin was fine, but Chang-jae always felt that her daughter-in-law wasn't a simple person. She then asked her daughter-in-law to accompany her to their family restaurant. Mijin agreed readily. To leave a good impression on her mother-in-law, Mijin voluntarily helped the staff clear the tables. She never expected to encounter her foster mother there. Feeling guilty, Mijin dropped the tableware on the ground. She realized that her foster mother worked there. One day, her shameful past would be exposed. Then her dream of marrying into a wealthy family would be shattered. To keep her foster mother from speaking out, Mijin withdrew all her savings. She then arranged to meet her foster mother. She hoped her foster mother would pretend not to recognize her. Yeon-ae saw this and left without saying a word. Mijin thought that if her foster mother dared to expose her, they would all die together. In the days that followed, Mijin was particularly attentive to her grandfather. She knew that as long as her grandfather was on her side, she wouldn't have to worry about anything. To win her family's favor, Mijin took on all the household chores by herself. But not long after, Mijin's misfortune struck again. That day, an aunt from North Korea came looking for her. It turned out that the aunt had come to ask her for money. Mijin panicked and told the aunt to leave quickly. She promised to send the money back later. At that moment, Chang-jae saw the two of them acting suspiciously. The aunt, noticing this, left discreetly. Chang-jae asked his daughter-in-law who the woman was. Mijin lied, saying she was just asking for directions. Chang-jae didn't know that Mijin had escaped from North Korea, and she had a child, a foster mother, an aunt, and a daughter left behind in North Korea. These three uncertain factors left Mijin unable to rest easy. In order to maintain her status as the wife of a wealthy family, Mijin took a risk and decided to start with her foster mother. To prevent her shameful past from being exposed, Mijin stayed by her grandfather's side every day, looking for an opportunity to get rid of her foster mother. Finally, one day, she got her chance. The foster mother asked her grandfather for permission to go to the kindergarten to watch her grandson's performance. Daotae, out of curiosity, also said he wanted to go. The scheming Mijin immediately came up with a wicked plan. She exaggerated the story and told her mother-in-law. Upon hearing this, Chang-jae became furious. She believed that her father-in-law and Yeon-ae were having an affair. To secure the family fortune, Chang-jae angrily confronted Yeon-ae and accused her of seducing an elderly man for money. Yeon-ae tearfully denied the accusation. She didn't know that she was Daotae's wife. Chang-jae was only the wife of Daotae's cousin. Just then, Da-ho walked over. He scolded his wife to let go. Yeon-ae took the opportunity to leave the dining room. Such a scandal had occurred in the family. Da-ho angrily pulled his wife to go find his uncle to ask for an explanation. Chang-jae, seeing this, immediately said she had only heard it from her daughter-in-law. Mijin, upon hearing this, pushed open the door and quickly apologized to her father-in-law. She said she had misunderstood the relationship between her grandfather and the employee. Da-ho, upon hearing this, did not hold a grudge and forgave his daughter-in-law. The matter was finally settled. However, Yeon-ae, after being falsely accused, felt too ashamed to go back to work. Mijin secretly rejoiced that her goal had been achieved. Now that she had driven away her foster mother, she no longer had to worry about her ugly past being exposed. Next, Mijin gave the aunt who had raised her daughter in North Korea some money, and instructed her to send money back regularly in the future. She also told her not to come back here under any circumstances. If her plan failed, no one would have an easy life. After sending the aunt away, Mijin thought she could finally rest easy. She fantasized about becoming the mistress of this household, and inheriting her grandfather's billion-dollar fortune with ease. But before long, the aunt called again. Coincidentally, Chang-jae's mother answered the phone. Upon hearing the North Korean accent, Chang-jae immediately grew suspicious. When Mijin went out to meet the aunt, he followed behind. He overheard their secret conversation. He learned that Mijin had fled from North Korea. How could Chang-jae possibly accept her as his daughter-in-law? She asked Mijin if Hee-don knew about this. Mijin panicked and said Hee-don didn't know. She begged her mother-in-law not to tell the family. Chang-jae pushed her away forcefully and ordered her to leave immediately. Chang-jae then locked Mijin out of the house. Mijin Mijin begged her mother-in-law to let her in. Chang-jae not only refused to open the door, but also poured a bucket of water on her. Soon after, Ki-dong returned. Mijin quickly wiped away her tears and said she had come out to greet him. Unaware of the situation, Ki-dong praised his wife. Thus, Mijin followed her husband back home. In front of his son, Chang-jae did not lose his temper. She then called Mijin into her room and locked the door. Mijin begged her mother-in-law to forgive her. Chang-jae asked her if she had married Hee-don just to get our family's fortune. Mijin panicked and said that wasn't the case. She truly loved Hee-don and married him out of love. Chang-jae angrily pushed Mijin onto the bed and beat her viciously. She wanted to drive Mijin out immediately, but out of consideration for her son's feelings, Chang-jae temporarily refrained from exposing Mijin. Regardless of how her mother-in-law abused her, for the sake of the billion-dollar estate, Mijin would never leave the mansion. Chang-jae went to great lengths to torment Mijin, but Mijin firmly believed that one day she would become the mistress of this household. Therefore, no matter how her mother-in-law treated her, she endured it silently. Chang-jae finally realized that Mijin had planned everything from the beginning, from helping her drive away the thugs to meeting Hee-don later on. Chang-jae resolved to kill this wicked woman. That day, Dati's ring went missing. The ring was very important to him. The entire family searched everywhere but couldn't find it. Mijin learned from the maid that the ring was a token of love between her grandfather and his wife. Mijin thought that if she found the ring, her grandfather would surely remember this kindness, as long as her grandfather was on her side. Even if her mother-in-law found out she was a North Korean defector, she wouldn't dare do anything to her. That day, Mijin accidentally found the ring in the bathroom. When her grandfather saw the ring, he was overjoyed. Chang-jae watched his wife's triumphant expression with a bitter taste in his mouth. The next day, an important guest came to the house. After eavesdropping, they found out that he was a private detective hired by the grandfather. The detective told Daodae that his family had been found. He had a son, but he was killed in a gunfight when he fled North Korea a few years ago. Daodae couldn't believe it. The detective then told Daodae that he also had a granddaughter. Da-ho was shocked. The detective then showed them the investigation results. He said that his son's name was Daehoon. Daehoon's wife's name was unknown, but his living granddaughter was named Seung-hee, and she should be living in South Korea. Upon hearing the names Daehoon and Seung-hee, Mijin panicked. She immediately thought of Mibon, who had changed her name. Upon hearing that her father-in-law's family was still alive, Chang-jae nearly fainted. Daodae, upon hearing that his granddaughter was still alive, he immediately arranged for his nephew to find his granddaughter. At that moment, Mijin was very panicked. She couldn't believe that her adoptive father's family was connected to her grandfather. To confirm her suspicions, Mijin found her adoptive mother. Looking at the ring on her adoptive mother's hand, Mijin was certain that the ring was a pair with her grandfather's ring. After leaving her adoptive mother's rental house, Mijin couldn't believe any of this. The next day, her mother-in-law tried to kick Mijin out again. Now that Mijin knew the truth, she was no longer afraid of her mother-in-law. She immediately packed her bags and prepared to leave. But when she thought about how harsh her mother-in-law had been to her, Mijin instantly changed her mind. Why should she be the one to leave? If she helped her grandfather find his granddaughter, her grandfather would surely give her a generous inheritance. For the money, Mijin decided to stay. After making her plan, Mijin first had a big argument with her mother-in-law, and then left the mansion. She found her foster mother and lied that she had been kicked out by her mother-in-law. She also showed her foster mother the injuries she had sustained from her mother-in-law's beatings. Yeonhae felt sorry for Mijin again. However, while Yeonhae was cooking, Mijin stole Seung-hee's toothbrush. She then went to the hospital, took out her grandfather's and Seung-hee's toothbrushes, and asked the doctor to conduct a paternity test. The doctor told her that a paternity test couldn't prove the relationship between her grandfather and his granddaughter. Mijin asked the doctor what that meant. The doctor said it could be done if it were a grandson, but not a granddaughter. Upon hearing this, Mijin came up with a bold plan. She decided to impersonate her grandfather's biological granddaughter. Once her grandfather died, the billion-dollar fortune would be hers. The most urgent task was to get the ring from her adoptive mother's hands. With a goal in mind, Mijin decided to move into her adoptive mother's rental house. Seung-hee found out and scolded her harshly. Yeonhae hurriedly called her daughter into the bedroom. Seung-hee blamed her mother for doing this. Yeonhae, however, believed that Mijin should be given a chance to start over. Seung-hee believed that Mijin had brought this upon herself, but under her mother's insistence, Seung-hee had no choice but to give in. In the middle of the night, Mijin began her plan to steal the ring. However, the adoptive mother never took the ring off her finger. With no other option, Mijin had to give up. The next day, she tried several times, but still couldn't get the ring. Finally, one night, the evil Mijin knocked her adoptive mother unconscious and snatched it away. When Yeonhae woke up, Seung-hee discovered that the ring was missing. Yeonhae panicked immediately. The ring was very important to her. since the surveillance cameras at the scene were broken. The police couldn't investigate. Meanwhile, Mijin was thrilled with the stolen ring. She swore to change her fate and become her grandfather's heir. To avoid arousing her adoptive mother's suspicions, she returned to her adoptive mother's home pretending to care about her. Upon learning that there were no surveillance cameras at the scene, Mijin secretly rejoiced. Now she could use the ring to impersonate the granddaughter of a wealthy family with confidence. To show the ring to her grandfather, she knelt on the ground, wailing and crying, confessing that she was a North Korean defector. Chon-jae, seeing this, said that Mijin had been lying from the start. Her identity, name, and age were all fake. Upon hearing this, the grandfather was so angry he nearly fainted. Mijin knew the time was right. She deliberately exposed the ring on her hand and cried out, begging her grandfather for forgiveness. Date was greatly surprised upon seeing the ring. He then asked Mijin where she had gotten it. Mijin recounted everything she had overheard from the detective earlier. Date was so overwhelmed he fainted. When he came to, he hugged his granddaughter and wept uncontrollably. The ring was a gift he had given to his wife. Based on the ring alone, Date was certain that the woman before him was his granddaughter. Chon-jae was no longer calm. She didn't believe that someone like Mijin could be her father-in-law's granddaughter. She suggested that her husband take his father to get a paternity test. Da-ho also thought it made sense. The next morning at breakfast, Da-ho gently told his uncle that recognizing family ties shouldn't be done blindly, especially when it involves property. To ensure there were no mistakes, they should get a paternity test. Upon hearing this, Date was unhappy. He believed the ring was the best proof. Mijin saw this and also urged her grandfather to get a paternity test. Date happily agreed. In fact, Mijin had already known that a paternity test between the granddaughter and the grandfather was impossible. Sure enough, the doctor informed them that samples from the grandfather and granddaughter alone were insufficient for testing. The DNA of the girl's father was required. Chon-jae could do nothing but accept the situation. Thus, Mijin fulfilled her dream and became the sole heiress of the conglomerate. Meanwhile, the grandfather's true granddaughter remained working as a low-level employee at his company. Since Mijin had impersonated the grandfather's biological granddaughter, the once abusive mother-in-law had completely changed her attitude and began to serve her. But the happy days didn't last long. Mijin received another message from her aunt Kim-ji in North Korea. Upon hearing that Kim-ji was at her doorstep with a guest she wanted to see, she rushed out of the house. To her surprise, Kim-ji had brought her daughter Yujin. It turned out that when Yujin was just a few months old, Mijin had abandoned her and fled to South Korea. Yujin had no idea that Mijin was her mother. Mijin panicked and accused Kim-ji of doing this to her. Kim-ji dismissed her, saying that she and her child also wanted to live in South Korea. Mijin, feeling guilty, begged Kim-ji to take the child somewhere else first. She promised to contact them later. However, Kim-ji said she had spent all her money on plane tickets. They couldn't even afford food now. Before Mijin could go home to get money, her grandfather happened to see them. He asked who they were. Mijin stammers and lies, saying they were her neighbors in North Korea. Upon hearing they were from North Korea, Date feels a sense of kinship. He hurriedly asks Mijin to invite the guests inside. Date thanks Kim-ji for helping his granddaughter in the past. Kim-ji is confused by the mention of granddaughter. Ultimately, she enters the mansion at Date's invitation. Date once again thanked her for taking care of his granddaughter in the past. Mijin felt uneasy. She was afraid that Kim-ji would slip up and reveal her true identity. During the subsequent conversation, Kim-ji finally realized that Mijin was impersonating the granddaughter of a wealthy family. In order to ask Mijin for more money, she decided not to expose her for the time being. Mijin then took Kim-ji and her daughter and left the mansion. Kim-ji scolded her for being too cruel. Mijin threatened Kim-ji, saying that soon his entire family was dead. For your own safety, you'd better keep this secret. Kim-ji was terrified. They eventually reached an understanding. As long as Mijin gave her money, she would keep the secret. Several months passed. Yeonhae ran into Kim-ji, a restaurant. The two had known each other from their time in North Korea. The two, who hadn't seen each other in years, poured out their hearts to each other, but she never mentioned Mijin. Yeonhae said her daughter was about to get married and wanted Kim-ji to come to Seung-hee's wedding in a few days. Unexpectedly, at the wedding, Mijin was startled to see Kim-ji. She was curious how Kim-ji was connected to Seung-hee's family. She then pulled Kim-ji aside and threatened her to leave immediately. But Kim-ji not only refused to leave, but also told her about the impersonation of her granddaughter. However, their conversation was overheard by Chon-jae. Chon-jae immediately wanted to expose her to Date, but Mijin threatened her mother-in-law with her billion-dollar fortune. This made Chon-jae abandon the idea of revealing the truth. In the end, the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law reached an understanding to get their hands on Date's billion-dollar fortune. Chon-jae asked Mijin if anyone else knew about her fake granddaughter besides Kim-ji, who came from North Korea. Mijin firmly said no one else knew. Chon-jae immediately told her to call Kim-ji and arrange a meeting to settle things. However, no one answered the phone. The mother-in-law and daughter-in-law never expected that Kim-ji had already gone to their house. Seeing her chatting with her grandfather, The mother-in-law and daughter-in-law felt uneasy. After the grandfather left, Mijin dragged Kim-ji into the bedroom and asked her where the child was. Kim-ji said she was at Soon-hee's house. Mijin grew tense upon hearing this. She feared her daughter would reveal their relationship. The three then sat down to negotiate terms. As long as Kim-ji didn't reveal the fake granddaughter's identity, they agreed to give her 1 billion. To their surprise, Kim-ji demanded 10 billion instead. Chang-jae was furious upon hearing this. Kim-ji told her that none of them were good people. 10 billion wasn't much for her grandfather's billion-dollar estate. Mijin reluctantly agreed to her terms. Kim-ji told them to have the money ready by 9 o'clock that night. Mijin was at a loss. Preparing that much money would take at least a week. Kim-ji refused to budge. She gave them another hour at most. Otherwise, she couldn't guarantee she wouldn't blab. Seeing Kim-ji's arrogant demeanor, the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law were helpless. They withdrew their savings and pooled 200 million. But when they went to give the money to Kim-ji, they saw her being chased by several debt collectors. The mother-in-law and daughter-in-law rushed over immediately. They heard Kim-ji scream in pain. She had been running too fast and ended up in a car accident. Kim-ji died on the spot. After Kim-ji's death, the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law secretly felt relieved. When the grandfather asked about Kim-ji's child, Mijin finally remembered her daughter Yujin. At that moment, Yujin was at Yeonhee's house and heard the news of her aunt's death, crying so hard she couldn't stop. To avoid revealing the truth, Mijin went to her foster mother and said she wanted to take the child to find her aunt. Yeonhee believed her and handed the child over, but the woman who came to pick up the child was not her aunt at all. Seeing the stranger, Yujin was terrifying and trembled uncontrollably. In desperation, she called out to Mijin, "Mom." In the end, Mijin left her in Seoul. For her own dream of entering a wealthy family, she secretly sent her daughter to a boarding kindergarten and instructed her not to tell the teachers or classmates that she had a mother. One day, Dae took Mijin to the company and ran into Soon-hee. Mijin panicked when she saw Soon-hee. At that moment, Grandpa immediately recognized Soon-hee and asked her what she was doing there. Soon-hee said she worked in the marketing department of the company. Dae was surprised. Soon-hee was about to ask Grandpa about Mijin's relationship with him. Mijin quickly asked Soon-hee how she knew her grandfather. At this moment, Dae still didn't know that the girl named Mi-bon in front of him was his granddaughter. Mijin was afraid of being exposed. She said that she had known Mi-bon in North Korea. Grandfather sighed and said that the two of them were truly destined to meet. Mijin was very flustered at this moment. In order not to be exposed, she quickly urged her grandfather to go home. Watching her grandfather's departing figure, Soon-hee couldn't understand how Mijin, who was an orphan adopted by her mother, could be the granddaughter of a wealthy family. With questions in her mind, Soon-hee immediately called her mother to ask if Mijin had a grandfather in Korea. Her mother said that Mijin had no relatives in Korea. Soon-hee never imagined that Mijin had stolen her mother's ring to impersonate her and become the granddaughter of a wealthy family. Meanwhile, Mijin had been feeling uneasy ever since she saw Soon-hee at her grandfather's company. She discussed a plan with her mother-in-law. Both agreed that Soon-hee couldn't stay to company any longer. Mijin then approached her grandfather and said she wanted to work at the company. Her grandfather readily agreed. Soon, Mijin became the head of the marketing department at the group. Soon-hee felt that Mijin had ulterior motives. Sure enough, Mijin soon found Soon-hee and told her to address her as director from now on. She also instructed her to pretend that they didn't know each other before. Soon-hee had no idea that Mijin's true purpose for joining the company was to drive her out. This way, the secret of her impersonating the chaebol's granddaughter could remain hidden forever. To completely get rid of Soon-hee, Mijin began plotting her scheme. One day, Dae suddenly fainted at the company. Everyone panicked. In the midst of the crisis, Soon-hee rushed over and performed CPR on him. At that moment, she remembered the first time she saw her grandfather. Soon-hee didn't know that she was the granddaughter he had been searching for all these years. In the end, her grandfather regained consciousness thanks to Soon-hee's efforts. This bought time for his further treatment. At the hospital, Mijin threw herself into her grandfather's arms and pretended to be worried. Chang-jae saw this and looked down on Mijin's behavior. At the company, Soon-hee heard from her team leader that her grandfather was safe and sound. She felt a mix of emotions. Why did she feel such an inexplicable sense of familiarity toward her grandfather? A few days later, her grandfather recovered and was discharged from the hospital. He arranged for his family to host a banquet to thank his savior. Unexpectedly, the two people they least wanted to see showed up. Mijin was flustered when she saw Soon-hee. The grandmother was also surprised by such a coincidence. Mijin quickly approached Soon-hee to greet her and thanked her for saving her grandfather. At the dinner table, everyone chatted and laughed, except Mijin and her grandmother, who were deep in thought. Grandfather asked Soon-hee where she learned CPR. Soon-hee said she learned it at the Pyongyang Art School. Upon hearing Pyongyang, the grandfather realized that Soon-hee had also fled from North Korea. When they talked about life in North Korea, Soon-hee and the grandfather found a common topic. Seung-hee said that her grandmother loved to eat bean curd rice. The grandfather sighed, saying that he also missed the bean curd rice from his hometown. The grandfather asked Seung-hee if her grandmother was still in North Korea. Before Seung-hee could answer, Chon-jae tried to divert the attention. She deliberately dropped her cup on the floor. Daotae never imagined that Seung-hee was his real granddaughter, and the Mijin he had been spoiling was actually an imposter. After dinner, Grandpa asked Seung-hee to go to his room. Upon hearing this, Chon-jae rushed to Daotae's room and took the ring he had been keeping. She knew that if Seung-hee saw the ring, the truth about the fake granddaughter would be exposed. Seeing what her mother-in-law was holding, Mijin finally breathed a sigh of relief. In the room, Grandpa took out a stack of money and gave it to Seung-hee as a token of gratitude. Seung-hee insisted on not taking it. Grandpa said he wouldn't feel at ease unless she accepted it. Seung-hee suggested that Grandpa could treat her to a few good meals as compensation. The two then started joking around. Suddenly, Grandpa looked at the table and realized something was missing. He immediately left the room and asked Mijin where she had put the photo frame with the ring. Mijin took advantage of Grandpa's distraction to quickly send Seung-hee away. After Grandpa entered the room, Chon-jae put the photo frame back on the table and made up an excuse that the maid might have put it in the wrong place while cleaning. After calming Grandpa down, the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law discussed how they absolutely had to get Seung-hee fired from the company. They then planned to find a way to send them both far away. Seung-hee never imagined that Grandpa's kindness would lead her into an even bigger conspiracy. That day, Mijin, who was the director, saw a shipping document with Mibong listed as the responsible person. She immediately had an idea. Mibong never expected that the batch of clothing she had personally supervised and distributed to the mall had turned into scrap paper. The company had lost clothing worth tens of millions of dollars for no reason. Mijin immediately confronted Mibong to hold her accountable. Mibong tried to explain, but Mijin interrupted her and said, "You were responsible for this shipment, so you should take responsibility." Mibong tried her best to explain, hoping that the leadership would investigate the truth before making a decision. In fact, Mijin knew exactly what had happened. She asked Mibong if she had any evidence to prove her innocence. Mibong recalled the details of the shipment that day. She felt that nothing had gone wrong in the warehouse. Now, only the delivery driver knew what had happened. She suggested confronting the driver, but Mijin said there was no need for that. She then called her secretary. The secretary held the driver's phone recording and said he had already confirmed it. The driver had no opportunity to commit the crime. With the driver's testimony, Mijin insisted that Mibong had stolen the goods. She told Mibong that she would compensate for the goods herself. However, this violated the commitment made to the client. Any losses beyond the monetary compensation must be borne by Mibong herself. For the sake of the company's image, Mijin decided to fire Mibong on her own. Mibong desperately explained that she hadn't done it. Regarding Mibong's explanation, Mijin not only refused to listen, but also had her secretary forcefully drag her out. Later, Mibong went to ask the driver if he had stopped anywhere along the way. The driver told her he had only delivered the goods to the store according to the order. As for the goods being swapped, he knew nothing about it. The driver hadn't made any mistakes. Mibong secretly suspected that someone had deliberately framed her. She then told her husband about it. As a seasoned lawyer, Django immediately realized that his wife had been framed. To clear his wife's name, Django began investigating the logistics company. From the surveillance footage, there were no issues with the outbound records for that day. The next day, he accompanied Mibong back to the supermarket. There were no issues with the surveillance footage either. Suddenly, Django had an epiphany. He asked the manager to zoom in on the truck's license plate. Upon closer inspection, he noticed a discrepancy. The truck that left the warehouse was not the same one that arrived. This was sufficient evidence that the delivery driver was at fault. When they confronted the driver, Django told him that if he didn't come clean, they would report him to the police immediately. The driver assumed they had no evidence. He impatiently told Django he knew nothing. Seeing the driver's refusal to admit anything, Django presented the evidence. Upon seeing the license plate photo, the driver realized he was exposed. With the evidence in front of him, the driver tried to flee. Django wasn't about to let him get away. Ultimately, Django brought the driver to the company. Just then, Daotae spotted the three of them. The secretary informed him that Mibong had been fired. To gather more information, Daotae brought them and the driver into Mijin's office. Upon seeing the driver, Mijin knew something was wrong. When Mibong presented the evidence, she thought she was exposed, but unexpectedly, the driver took all the blame for her. This relieved Mijin. In the end, the driver was fired. Mibong remained at the company. Regarding Mijin's mistake, grandfather simply scolded her a few times. Afterward, the driver sought an explanation from Mijin. Mijin agreed to give him some living expenses. Unexpectedly, their conversation was overheard by a company director. The director then approached Mijin and informed her that he had transferred the driver to another warehouse. He assured her that he would not cause any further trouble. Mijin realized that the director must have found something incriminating against her. His goal was to secure a better future for himself within the company. The director also promised Mijin that he would handle any similar incidents in the future. She hadn't driven Mibong away, yet she had been caught holding the evidence. Just as Mijin was filled with anxiety, another shocking piece of news reached her. Her husband had taken Grandpa to a welfare center for a charitable activity and accidentally discovered Yujin. Grandpa had always believed that Yujin was Kimji's child. He wanted to bring Yujin home to give Mijin a surprise. However, when Mijin received Grandpa's call, she panicked. The grandfather didn't know that Yujin was the child Mijin had sent to the welfare home. Mijin realized that if her daughter called her mom at home, the consequences would be unimaginable. At that moment, Yujin also recognized her grandfather. She knew that if her mother saw her, she wouldn't be happy, so Yujin ignored her grandfather's attempts to stop her and rushed back to the welfare home. Just as she reached the door, she bumped into her mother. Before her daughter could speak, Mijin pretended to be shocked and said she thought she had returned to North Korea. She then hugged her daughter and pretended to comfort her. Mijin asked her grandfather how Yujin ended up at the orphanage. Her grandfather, who was unaware of the situation, explained everything. Mijin then took her daughter into the bedroom and asked her if she had told the truth. Yujin shook her head and said no. Upon hearing this, Mijin sighed in relief. She instructed her daughter never to reveal their mother-daughter relationship. Yujin obediently nodded. Thus, the poor girl left her mother behind in the mansion, believing her to be an aunt. After handling her daughter's matter, Mijin turned her attention to Mibong. This time, she had the board member as an accomplice. Ousting Mibong from the company was only a matter of time. The shameless pair colluded together. They tampered with Mibong's case. A few days later, Ki-dong sent Yujin to a nearby kindergarten. There, Yujin met Seung-hee's nephew, Ru-seung. Mijin never imagined that the two children would cause her such trouble. One day after school, Yujin invited Ru-seung to her house to play. Ru-seung accidentally saw the matching rings in Doubty's room. He didn't understand how his grandmother's ring ended up there. Ru-seung stared at the ring in a daze. Yujin thought he liked it, so before leaving, she gave him one of the rings. When Mijin came home from work and saw the ring on her daughter's hand, she panicked and scolded her daughter, saying the rings couldn't be touched. Mijin then went to her grandfather's room. She intended to put the ring back in the frame. After looking at the frame, she asked Yujin where the other one was. Yujin nervously said she gave it to Ru-seung. Mijin asked if it was Ru-seung from Mibong's house. Yujin nodded. At that moment, Mijin was completely panicked. In order to get the ring back, Mijin asked her mother-in-law to go to Yeonhee's house to find Ru-seung. She knew that if she went herself, Seung-hee would definitely suspect her. For the sake of their common goal, her mother-in-law found Ru-seung. She told Ru-seung that Yujin was waiting for him in the car outside the house. Ru-seung didn't think much of it and followed Chon-jae out of the house. Unexpectedly, as soon as he got into the car, Chon-jae immediately asked him, angrily, where he had put the ring. Ru-seung was so scared that he started crying. He didn't know where the ring was either. Chon-jae was afraid of disturbing the neighbors. She quickly covered Ru-seung's mouth. Mijin saw this and told Ru-seung to think hard about where he had put the ring. If he found it, she would buy him lots of toes. Ru-seung really couldn't remember. Maybe it had fallen at home. To find the ring, Chon-jae took Ru-seung back home again. After confirming that no one else was home, she began frantically searching through Ru-seung's belongings. But after searching for a long time, she still couldn't find it. She angrily asked Ru-seung where the ring was. Ru-seung was immediately scared into tears. Chon-jae saw this and had no choice but to give up. She then threatened Ru-seung not to tell his aunt or grandmother about the ring. Otherwise, the police would come and arrest him. Ru-seung, out of fear, agreed. Actually, Ru-seung wasn't lying. He had accidentally dropped the ring on the ground. When Mijin and her mother-in-law returned home, she told her daughter not to mention the ring in front of the family. Grandfather was furious when he saw the ring was missing. Chon-jae quickly said that he had accidentally thrown it away while cleaning the room. Then she and her daughter-in-law knelt before grandfather and begged for forgiveness. In the end, for the sake of his granddaughter, grandfather forgave her. The next day, Yujin told Ru-seung that her aunt was very angry about the ring incident. This matter must not be revealed to anyone. Otherwise, her aunt would send her to an orphanage. Ru-seung promised to keep the secret. Meanwhile, Mijin, to prevent her secret from being exposed, accelerated her efforts to drive out her foster mother's family. Outside the company, Mijin planned to use her mother-in-law to ruin her foster mother's reputation. At the company, she used her authority to retaliate against Mibong. She hired someone to follow her father-in-law and took photos of him meeting with her adoptive mother. She then had the photos sent to her mother-in-law. The next day, her mother-in-law received the photos of her husband with Yeonhae. Enraged, she stormed into her uncle's room with the photos. She demanded that her uncle take justice into his own hands. Daotae looked at the photos and assumed his nephew had done something to betray Chon-jae. He immediately called Da-ho back to see him. Seeing the chaos at home, Mijin let out a faint smile. Daotae held the photos and demanded his nephew explain. Seeing these mysterious photos, Da-ho was baffled. He couldn't explain. Chon-jae scolded scolded her husband for cheating on her without telling her. Daotae reprimanded his nephew for being irresponsible. Daho said he no longer wanted to live with his wife, who was acting so recklessly. Unaware of the truth, Daotae believed it was all Younghee's fault. Outside the room, Changjae was holding her husband back, preventing him from leaving. Daho was furious that his wife had sent someone to follow him and demanded a divorce. Little did he know that all of this was part of Mijin's scheme. Mijin had done this for two reasons. First, she wanted to break up their marriage so she can inherit her grandfather's billion-dollar fortune. And second, to incite her mother-in-law to go find her biological mother and have her family leave Seoul. Sure enough, soon after, Changjae brought several tough women to confront Yeonhae. The commotion drew the attention of Soon-hee's mother-in-law and grandmother. Sunsu scolded Changjae for acting this way. Changjae's friends saw this and threw the photos on the ground. Sunsu picked them up and read them, then froze in shock. At that moment, Yeonhae couldn't explain herself. Before leaving, Changjae scolded Sunsu for not kicking Younghee's family out. Otherwise, he would take Hira back home. From then on, the two families severed all ties. Sunsu had always looked down on Younghee's family. Today's incident gave her the perfect excuse to get rid of them. Soon-hee, upon learning that her mother had been beaten, rushed home and scolded her mother for not fighting back. Yeonhae was so upset she didn't know where to start. Soon-hee asked her mother if she liked Daho, the company president. Yeonhae replied that it wasn't what she was thinking. Soon-hee curiously asked her mother about the photos. Yeonhae explained that a few days ago, Changjae had pushed her in a restaurant, causing her hand to get injured. After leaving the hospital following surgery, she happened to run into Daho, the company president. Due to excessive blood loss from the injury, she felt dizzy and leaned against Daho. Little did she know she was being photographed. This is how the misunderstanding arose. Back at her in-law's house, Soon-hee explained to her mother-in-law that her mother had no connection with the company president. However, her mother-in-law refused to believe her. She ordered Soon-hee and her family to leave immediately. Meanwhile, Mijin knew that her mother-in-law wouldn't let her adoptive mother off the hook. It was only a matter of time before her adoptive mother left the Django family. She kept a close eye on Soon-hee at the company every day. She swore to drive Soon-hee out of her grandfather's sight. A few days later, Soon-hee's new product design won an award. The company began producing the clothing she designed. Unexpectedly, the rival company also produced the same design. It was clear that the proposal had been leaked. The company's internal affairs department began investigating the matter. To everyone's surprise, they found 3 billion won in cash in Soon-hee's desk drawer. Colleagues all believed she had sold the proposal. Grandfather also deemed the evidence irrefutable and immediately decided to fire Soon-hee. Upon hearing this, the mother-in-law insisted her son divorce Soon-hee for her daughter's happiness. Yeonhae pleaded with her in-laws to consider the children's future, but Sunsu refused under any circumstances. Seeing her mother suffer for her sake, Soon-hee could no longer hold back. She decided to take her mother and move out of the house. Soon, Soon-hee found a new place for her mother. On the day of the move, Ru-soon found the lost ring. Yeonhae was overjoyed when she saw it. The next day, she went to see the chairman. She couldn't believe her daughter would betray the chairman for 3 billion won, but the chairman was completely different from usual. He harshly scolded the mother and daughter. He ordered the security guards not to let them appear at the company ever again. Daotae's words deeply shocked Yeonhae. Soon-hee, in despair, asked Django to meet her. She pleaded with Django to divorce her. Seeing his wife's haggard face, Django reluctantly agreed. To survive, Mi-bong and her mother decided to set up a stall to make money. But on the first day, they encountered the manager. In the end, not only did they not make any money, but they also lost money. Yeonhae, unwilling to give up, took the ring and asked Soon-hee if she could use the media to find her grandfather. Soon-hee agreed with her mother. The next day, the newspaper published information about the ring. Mijin was shocked when she saw it. She hurriedly called her mother-in-law to hide the newspaper at home, and found someone to impersonate her grandfather to meet Soon-hee. At the tea house, Soon-hee and her mother met the fake grandfather. The fake grandfather told them the ring was a token of his love for his wife. However, it had been too long, and he now had a family in Korea. The fake grandfather told them not to contact him again. This left Soon-hee and her mother deeply saddened. The two of them gave up on the idea of searching for their grandfather. Meanwhile, on Mijin's side, she and her mother-in-law met with the man impersonating the grandfather. The old man told them to do everything as they had been instructed. Despite this, Changjae remained worried that his daughter-in-law's fake identity might be exposed. Because the ring was in Yeonhee's possession, she had already lost it once. Now, stealing it was simply impossible. If one day the grandfather sees the ring, everything they had done would be in vain. Not only would they not get the billion-dollar fortune, they might even face legal trouble. Hearing her mother-in-law say this, Mijin felt very anxious. The only way to prevent the grandfather from seeing the ring was to make Soon-hee's family disappear completely. Mijin knew she had no way out. She came to find her foster mother with a purpose, but her foster mother didn't notice. Mijin told her that Soon-hee had been fired from the company. As a company leader, she couldn't help either. Facing her grandfather's insistence, she was truly powerless. Yeon-hae gratefully told Mijin not to worry about it. Then Mijin asked her foster mother if Soon-hee had divorced. After receiving her foster mother's affirmative response, Mijin felt she had nothing left to fear. She revealed her true intentions. To repay her foster mother for raising her, she wanted her foster mother to take Soon-hee and Rusun to live in the United States. She would arrange for Soon-hee to work at the company's branch office there. As for Rusun's tuition fees, she would take full responsibility. Yeon-hae was a little surprised. She asked Mijin why she was giving them such a good opportunity. Mijin said it was because she owed her foster mother's family too much. After hearing this, her adoptive mother held her hand and thanked her repeatedly, saying she would discuss it with Soon-hee. Mijin told her to decide quickly, as there were many procedures to take care of. That night, Yeon-hae tried to ask her daughter if she would be willing to move to the United States with the family. She hoped that in a new place, they could forget all the unpleasant memories here. Although Soon-hee didn't understand why her mother had made this decision, she agreed to her mother's request. The next day, Soon-hee told Jango about her plan to go to the United States. Jango firmly disagreed. Soon-hee knew that their divorce was unavoidable. Just as she was struggling with whether or not to go to the United States, she suddenly received a call from her mother. Her mother told her to hurry home. She said she had seen her father today. When Soon-hee rushed home, she saw her mother curled up in bed. Yeon-hae told her daughter that her father was still alive. It turned out that an hour earlier, Yeon-hae had heard a man calling out Daehoon while she was setting up her stall. She noticed that the man looked exactly like her husband. However, the man didn't acknowledge her and left in a car. Yeon-hae felt that something was amiss. She had witnessed her husband being shot to death with her own eyes, but seeing him again today was shocking. Soon-hee thought her mother was devastated by the news about her grandfather. Yeon-hae firmly told Soon-hee that she hadn't seen wrong. Seeing her daughter's confused expression, her mother said that the man who had been with him at the time had called him Daehoon. Unfortunately, they hadn't had time to confirm it. Before they took a taxi and left, Soon-hee thought her mother was hallucinating. She wondered why her father wouldn't come find them if he was really alive. Yeon-hae thought her daughter's words made sense. In fact, the Daehoon she saw was indeed Soon-hee's father. At that moment, he was at the hospital visiting her grandfather. However, Daehoon did not recognize his own father. He only knew that his father had died in the Battle of Nodong. He was a hero of the Republic. Dae was shocked. Daho explained that Daehoon had been shot while defecting from North Korea. This had caused his memory to freeze at the age of 10. The detective told the chairman that Daehoon occasionally regains some memories, but most of the time he is like this. To be on the safe side, Dae and Daehoon underwent a paternity test. The results confirmed their biological relationship. Seeing the son he had searched for over the decades, Dae was overcome with emotion, but Daehoon refused to acknowledge him as his father. He insisted that his father had died in the battle. After the detective explained everything, Daehoon finally understood. His father was still alive. Dae then took his biological son home. Mijin was stunned when she saw her adoptive father. Her mother-in-law quickly hinted that Daehoon had lost his memory. Mijin understood and took her adoptive father's hand to acknowledge their relationship. She then deliberately asked her father why he didn't recognize her. The grandfather explained that Daehoon had been shot and suffered trauma, leading to amnesia. Although his son has intellectual disabilities, he is still his own child. Later, during the family reunion, the grandfather was overjoyed to have found his own family. In the days that followed, the grandfather believed everyone could live happily together, but he never imagined that his granddaughter was fake. Although Daehoon had lost his memory, he did not recognize her as his daughter from the bottom of his heart. What terrified Mijin even more was that one night, Daehoon suddenly regained his memory for a brief moment. He suddenly asked Mijin angrily, "Where is Soon-hee?" Then he suddenly grabbed his head and started hitting himself. Mijin realized that one day, her identity as a fake granddaughter would be exposed. Meanwhile, Yeon-hae had seen her husband at the place where she was selling things, so she started selling things at the same place every day. But the weak Yeon-hae was always bullied by others, just as she was being bullied by bully. Daho came to her rescue. Yeon-hae understood Daho's feelings. She told Daho rationally that their current situation did not allow them to be together. One day, by chance, Daehoon was seen by his biological daughter, Soon-hee. Since Daehoon had lost his memory, when Soon-hee called him dad, he did not recognize his daughter. Soon-hee saw her father with her own eyes. She was certain her father was still alive. After returning home, she told her mother about her father. The mother and daughter decided to distribute flyers to find him. Little did they know that every move they made was under Mijin's watchful eye. Mijin realized that if Soon-hee and her mother were to meet Daehoon, her dreams of becoming a wealthy heiress would be shattered. After careful consideration, she went to find her adopted adoptive mother and offered them a generous deal to move to the United States. But soon he said she had seen her father in Seoul. She wanted to stay there to find him. Mijin was helpless. When she returned home, Daehoon regained his memory briefly and immediately called out her name. With no other choice, Mijin began her new plan. She planned to hire someone to set a trap for Yeonhae. The man claimed to know Daehoon's whereabouts. The man's words made the mother and daughter believe him. However, he demanded $2,000,000 to arrange a meeting with Daehoon for her father. Seung-hee and her mother approached their landlord to request a refund of the security deposit. The landlord, seeing their situation, raised the monthly rent from 300,000 won to 500,000 won. Yeonhae had no choice but to agree. They never imagined that after transferring the 2,000,000 won to the scammer's account, the scammer's phone went dead. They hadn't seen the man and had lost 2,000,000 won. This was a devastating blow for them. Mijin knew that 20,000,000 won was an enormous sum for Seung-hee's family. She didn't believe they could survive. Seeing the opportunity, the ruthless Mijin came back to her foster mother. She said she had arranged everything for them in the United States. But Seung-hee firmly refused to go to the United States. She wanted to stay and find her father. Mijin had miscalculated again, but she wasn't willing to give up. Since the mother and daughter refused to leave, she had no choice but to implement another plan. She lured Daehoon out of the mansion and arranged for him to be kidnapped. Her original intention was to send Daehoon to North Korea. However, before the kidnappers could put Daehoon on the boat, he managed to escape. The grandfather was very worried because he hadn't seen his son all day. After escaping from the pier, a man saw that he was mentally disabled and lured him to a cattle farm. Thus, Daehoon began working as a cattle herder. Meanwhile, Seung-hee, in order to pay the rent, went out every day to do manual labor. Although she had divorced Jango, he still felt sorry for his ex-wife. He took out a loan to help Seung-hee buy a shop. The mother and daughter opened a dumpling restaurant. Meanwhile, Daehoon, one day, he suddenly saw the man who had kidnapped him at the dairy farm. He managed to escape the bad guys again and ran out of the farm. Just as he was starving and freezing, he accidentally came across Seung-hee's dumpling restaurant. Having not eaten all day, Daehoon stole a dumpling through the window, but Seung-hee saw him. Seung-hee recognized her father at once. She ran out to find him but couldn't find him. In the end, Daehoon met a kind driver who took him back to the mansion. Mijin was so flustered when she saw Daehoon that she didn't know what to do. Daehoon told his father that the dumpling he had stolen while escaping tasted exactly like the ones his mother made. His son's words brought back memories for Daehoon. He tells his son that he will take him to return the money for the dumplings tomorrow and try the dumplings at that restaurant. Meanwhile, Seung-hee is upset that her father stole dumplings. She is certain that her father must have lost his memory, otherwise he wouldn't recognize them. Her mother analyzes that her husband must have mental issues to steal food. The next day, Grandpa says he will take Daehoon to eat dumplings. Coincidentally, Chong-jae heard from her in-laws that Yeonhae had used Jango's money to open a dumpling restaurant. Chong-jae was very panicked upon hearing this. She immediately ran to the company and told her daughter-in-law the news. Mijin was also very panicked upon hearing this. If her grandfather took her adoptive father to meet her adoptive mother and Seung-hee, her identity as a fake granddaughter would definitely be exposed. The top priority was to stop Grandpa from meeting Seung-hee. The mother-in-law and daughter-in-law rushed to the dumpling restaurant. Sure enough, they saw Grandpa and Daehoon. To stop Grandpa from entering the restaurant, Mijin called Grandpa and said she was in severe pain. Upon hearing that his granddaughter was sick, Grandpa didn't care about eating dumplings anymore. He immediately took Daehoon and rushed home. Seeing his granddaughter pretending to be sick, Grandpa didn't think much of it. Then Chong-jae deliberately asked her uncle if he had found the dumpling restaurant. Daehoon said no, because Daehoon couldn't remember the location of the dumpling restaurant. Mijin said that if her father wanted dumplings, she and her mother-in-law would make them for him. Daehoon said he had to find that dumpling restaurant because he had eaten the dumplings without pain. He had to repay them. After Grandpa left, Mijin immediately changed her expression. She blamed her foster father for insisting on eating dumplings. If he kept pestering Grandpa to find that restaurant, she would tell Grandpa to send him to a mental hospital. Daehoon, frightened, agreed to listen to Mijin from now on. That night, Daehoon tossed and turned. Unable to sleep, he asked his father tearfully, "Is Mijin really my daughter?" Daehoon asked him why he would say that. Daehoon told his father that he felt afraid when he was with Mijin. After hearing his son's words, Daehoon fell deep in thought. He then found his nephew and asked him to arrange for Daehoon and Mijin to take a paternity test. But this matter was to remain between the two of them. Daehoon promised his uncle he would handle it flawlessly. When Mijin went to work, He took her toothbrush and Daehoon's toothbrush to the hospital. However, their conversation was overheard by Changjae. Changjae immediately sent a message to his wife, telling her to get up and come see her. As soon as they met, Changjae told Mijin that Daodae was going to take a paternity test the next day. With no other choice, Mijin asked her mother-in-law to go to Seung-hee's house the next day and steal her toothbrush. The next day, Changjae paid a locksmith to break into the rental house just as she was leaving with the toothbrush. Yeonhae happened to return. The two of them screamed in shock upon seeing each other. Yeonhae asked her what she was doing there. Unexpectedly, Changjae accused Yeonhae of stealing her husband. She then pretended to look for her husband everywhere. Yeonhae didn't want to deal with her and chased her away. At that moment, Changjae had already obtained Seung-hee's toothbrush. When she returned home, Mijin immediately swapped her toothbrush with Seung-hee's. However, her father-in-law took Daehoon and Seung-hee's toothbrushes to the hospital. When the test results came out, Grandpa smiled. Mijin and Daehoon were confirmed to be father and daughter. She had once again skillfully turned danger into safety. To thank her mother-in-law, Mijin took her shopping for luxury goods. The two women laughed and joked. They thought they could finally rest easy, but they never expected Daehoon to keep asking for his father to take him to that dumpling restaurant, saying he wanted to pay back the money for the dumplings. To prevent Daehoon from meeting his wife and daughter, Mijin did everything in her power to stop him, but this wasn't a sustainable solution. One day, they would reunite as a family. If grandfather acknowledged his granddaughter, all her efforts would be in vain. To ensure Daehoon never found the dumpling restaurant, Mijin decided to keep it a secret from Grandpa and bought the building where Seung-hee's dumpling restaurant was located at a high price. The building was now hers. She could evict the tenants as she pleased. One day, Daehoon saw the ring design on an advertisement. Mijin panicked upon seeing this. If Grandpa found out about this, he would definitely investigate. Out of desperation, she pretended to take Daehoon out to look for the dumpling restaurant, but in secret, she instructed her mother-in-law to dispose of the flyers at home. Mijin took Daehoon for a stroll around the neighborhood. When they returned home, her mother-in-law had already replaced the flyers Daehoon had been keeping with others. Originally, Daehoon wanted to show his father the flyer with the ring design, but when he opened the box, it was something else. Her son had already lost his memory and didn't take Daodae's word seriously. The flyer incident accelerated Mijin's plan to get rid of Seung-hee and her mother. The next day, she hired someone to smash the dumpling restaurant and ordered them to move out within a day. Django rushed over to stop them, but ended up being beaten and hospitalized. He found out that the building had been bought by the company. Yeonhae, who was unaware of the situation, came to Mijin to ask for her help. Unexpectedly, Mijin said she didn't know about it. She advised her foster mother to take the company's compensation and leave. The foster mother told her that Seung-hee's father had once come to the dumpling restaurant. If they moved, he wouldn't be able to find them if he came back. The foster mother didn't know that all of this was part of Mijin's plan. Meanwhile, in the hospital, Django, after much inquiry, he finally obtained the confirmed information that the person in charge of the company's building purchase and demolition was Mijin. Upon hearing this news, Seung-hee immediately went to find Mijin and asked her why she had lied. Mijin lied again, claiming she didn't know about it at the time. Seung-hee realized there was no point in arguing. She begged Mijin to wait until she found her father before demolishing the building, but Mijin firmly refused. With no other options left, she could only protest at the entrance of her grandfather's company. At that moment, her grandfather and Daehoon happened to arrive at the company entrance. Mijin was afraid they would meet, so she rushed forward to stop them and persuaded Daehoon to go home. Meanwhile, Seung-hee and Yeonhae, who had been searching for Daehoon, didn't notice that the person they were looking for was right nearby. Fortunately, the homeless person they had helped before came over. In the end, the group abandoned its plan to acquire the dumpling restaurant because of the protest. This incident affected the company's reputation. Mijin was scolded by her grandfather. Added to that, she had spoken harshly to her father several times before. This made her grandfather somewhat suspicious of Mijin. In order to restore her image, she took her father out shopping on her own initiative. She also sent photos of the two of them having a good time to her grandfather. While Mijin was out answering a phone call, Daehoon had another episode. Unexpectedly, he regained some of his memory, but forgot the time he had spent with his father. While wondering why he was there, he saw Yeonhae passing by under the overpass. He rushed down, shouting and running frantically. Yeonhae heard her husband's call. The long-separated couple finally recognized each other. They prepared to go home together, but halfway there, Daehoon's headache returned. He no longer recognized his wife. It turned out that the recovery of his memory was only temporary. Daehoon thought Yeonhae was trying to kidnap him. He pushed her away and tried to run away. By the time Yeonhae got up and tried to chase after him. She couldn't find Daehoon anywhere. The two, who had finally reunited, were separated once again. Seung-hee and her mother's dumpling restaurant was approached by TV station staff because their dumplings were delicious. They suggested they try promoting their dumplings on TV. Seung-hee and her mother were hesitant at first, but Jang-go pointed out that a national TV program would make it easier to find Daehoon. This brief reunion between Young-ae and Daehoon made them realize that Daehoon might have lost his memory. This only strengthened their resolve to use TV to find their family. Back home, Daehoon felt increasingly uneasy. He noticed that Young-ae was wearing what seemed to be his mother's ring. He decided to return to where he had met Young-ae yesterday to ask her about it. Just as he was about to leave, he ran into Mijin. Mijin locked Daehoon inside the house. Daehoon began to doubt whether Mijin was really his biological daughter. This made Mijin, who was already panicking, fly into a rage. She warned Daehoon never to mention it again, or she would send him to a mental hospital. Unexpectedly, Grandpa appeared at the door. Mijin's vicious threat was heard by him. Seeing his father, Daehoon quickly hid behind him. Grandpa asked Mijin why she was saying such things to her own father. Mijin lied, claiming that her father wasn't listening to her, so she was just scaring him. Grandpa was deeply disappointed by his granddaughter's flimsy excuse. From then on, Grandpa began to have a bad impression of Mijin because Mijin was unkind to Daehoon. Daehoon suddenly asked Yujin, "Is Mijin nice to you?" Yujin told Daehoon that since Mijin was her mother, she was very kind to her. Unexpectedly, Ki-dong overheard this secret. The next day, Ki-dong took his wife's and Yujin's hair to the hospital. When the test results came back, Ki-dong completely broke down. His wife and Yujin were actually mother and daughter. After returning home, Ki-dong handed the test results to Mijin. He then stated that he wanted to divorce Mijin. After the truth came out, Mijin wanted to send Yujin to an orphanage. Meanwhile, Chang-jae asked his son why he wanted to divorce. Seeing that his son couldn't give a reason, Chang-jae threatened to kill himself if he divorced her. Just then, Grandpa called Hee-dong and asked to see him. Actually, Mijin had told Grandpa about her child. She wanted Grandpa to persuade Hee-dong not to divorce her. Just as Hee-dong was talking to Grandpa about Yujin, Chang-jae overheard them. Even if Hee-dong could accept it, she couldn't. She then found her daughter-in-law and started beating her. Chang-jae then said he would expose Mijin as a fake granddaughter. Unbeknownst to them, the grandfather had overheard everything. The granddaughter was fake. Where was the real granddaughter? The grandfather couldn't bear the shock and fainted on the spot. While her grandfather was hospitalized in a coma, Mijin acted as the company's acting president without authorization and embezzled public funds to set up a secret fund. To be on the safe side, she not only paid a large sum of money to bribe the TV station to stop broadcasting live coverage of Seung-hee and her mother, but also hired someone to pose as a consumer and tamper with the dumplings sold by the restaurant. As a result, Seung-hee's dumpling restaurant was forced to close down. Due to quality issues with the dumplings produced by the factory they commissioned were unsold in large quantities. As a result, Seung-hee was left with a huge debt. Meanwhile, Mijin, fearing that Jang-go would discover evidence of her embezzlement, abused her authority to fire Jang-go. Just then, Sang-soo received a call from the court, stating that her family's house had been temporarily seized. She rushed to the bank and found out that it was her mother-in-law who had mortgaged the house to help Seung-hee by taking out a loan. Now the dumpling restaurant has been sealed off. The bank has temporarily seized the mortgaged property to ensure the safety of the funds. Meanwhile, the TV station has imposed an additional 10 billion won in liquidated damages on Seung-hee. Her father couldn't be found, and they were left with a huge debt. Just as the mother and daughter were at a loss, Sang-soo stormed over to their house. She then pulled out the contract and asked them what they were going to do now that the house was going to be taken away. She demanded that Yeon-ae pay 10 billion won to redeem the house. Yeon-ae didn't understand what she meant. Sang-soo scolded them for taking advantage of the elderly to secure a loan. Upon reviewing the contract terms, the mother and daughter realized that Jang-go's grandmother had mortgaged her property to help them. She had used her property as collateral. Seung-hee never imagined things would turn out this way. In order to find her father, she and her mother were burdened with tens of billions in debt. The invisible pressure was so overwhelming that soon he was hospitalized. At the hospital, Rusun happened to meet Daehoon, who was taking care of Daotae, and the two became good friends. The mother-in-law and daughter-in-law learned from Rusun that Yeon-ae was also staying at the same hospital. To prevent Daehoon and Yeon-ae from meeting, Chang-jae beat and scolded Daehoon, ordering him to go home immediately. After Daehoon left, Chang-jae urged Mijin to speed up the transfer of funds, but they didn't know that Daotae had already woken up. Daotae overheard their conversation. He pretended to be unconscious to see what these two wicked women would do next. To eliminate any future troubles, Mijin decided to send Daehoon to the United States. Daehoon insisted on staying with his father to take care of him. Mijin revealed her true colors. She told Daehoon that his father would never wake up again. Upon hearing this, Daehoon said he would tell Daho. He also said he had recorded everything she just said. Mijin angrily stomped on Daehoon's phone. Just then, Daho walked in. He asked his daughter-in-law why she was doing this. Mijin lied and said that her father's phone was broken. She wanted to buy a new one for him. Daehoon ran to Daho and told him that Mijin was forcing him to go to the United States. That's why he recorded it. Mijin had stepped on the phone to destroy the recording. Seeing his daughter-in-law's panicked expression, Daho knew there was something fishy going on with the phone. He then found someone to recover the data. After listening to the recording, he was shocked. He suspected that Mijin was not Daehoon's daughter. Daho then took samples of Daehoon's and his daughter-in-law's hair to the hospital for a paternity test. When the results came back, sure enough, the father-daughter relationship was not established. Half a month later, the grandfather woke up, seeing Mijin and Daho. He was about to explode in anger, but the grandfather signaled for him to hold back. Once everyone had left, the grandfather finally told Daho that Mijin was not Daehoon's daughter. Daho was stunned and asked how he knew. The grandfather then produced the paternity test report. After reading the report, the grandfather revealed the truth. Before being hospitalized, he had already heard the rumors but had never confirmed them. Now the truth was clear. What about the previous test results? If the hair samples had been switched, Mijin must know where the real Seung-hee is. Daho reasoned that since they knew each other, Mijin must be well informed about everything concerning Seung-hee. Only under such circumstances could the hair samples have been switched. The previous test results now made sense. Daho wanted to expose Mijin immediately, but Grandpa told him not to expose her until they found the real granddaughter. If they exposed Mijin immediately, she would definitely harm the real granddaughter. Grandpa was keeping Mijin under control, while instructing Daho to hire a private detective to resume the search for the granddaughter. Meanwhile, Seung-hee's family was desperate to keep the Jango family's house. She not only divorced Jango, but also took out a high-interest loan of 10 billion won to continue searching for her father. Seung-hee moved into a cramped rental house with her mother and Rusu. Yeon-ae lamented that the deposit for the house was gone, and the dumpling restaurant they had finally opened had closed. Seung-hee comforted her mother, saying that as long as they worked hard, they would one day reunite with her father. With this firm belief, the mother and daughter rallied once more. Seung-hee returned to the market to work as a porter, while her mother took a job as a waitress at a restaurant with Rusum. But no matter how hard they worked, the money they earned was barely enough to cover their debts. The debt collectors seized all their phones as collateral, leaving only one phone for Seung-hee, so they could contact her. They threatened her, saying that if she didn't answer the phone, her entire family would be killed. Without a phone, Seung-hee and her mother lost contact with the outside world. Suddenly, Rusum fell ill and was hospitalized. To save her grandson, Yeon-ae waited for hours outside Doughty's noodle shop until she saw Daho. She hesitantly asked Daho for 1 million won. After saying thank you, Yeon-ae turned and left. At that moment, Daho had no idea that Yeon-ae was Daehoon's wife. The next day, the private detective informed the chairman that the only people who defected from North Korea at the same time as Mijin were 28-year-old Mi-bong and her mother. Through phone records, it was confirmed that Mijin was in contact with these two people. The detective confidently told the chairman that the granddaughter he was looking for was likely Mi-bong. Upon hearing that Mi-bong and Yeon-ae were connected, the chairman hesitated. He said he knew both Mi-bong and Yeon-ae. With doubts, the grandfather asked Daho to find Mi-bong and her mother. Daho immediately called Yeon-ae. However, the number was disconnected. Meanwhile, at Seung-hee's place, one day, an unexpected visitor came to her house. The old man was none other than the fake grandfather who had refused to acknowledge her. The fake grandfather told Yeon-ae that he was not her grandfather. Someone had paid him 1 million won to impersonate him. Seung-hee asked him who had told him to do this. The old man told them it was an older woman and a young woman. He didn't remember their names, but he had the older woman's phone number. The old man then handed Seung-hee a piece of paper. Yeon-ae used a public phone to call the number. The person who answered was Chon-jae, although the person said it was the wrong number. Yeon-ae recognized her voice. At the same time, Chon-jae also found out who the other person was. She immediately hung up the phone. She then told Mijin about it. Mijin realized the seriousness of the situation. She then found the head of the Loan Shark gang and gave him 10 billion won. The condition was that Seung-hee's family had to disappear from South Korea. Seeing this, the Loan Shark agreed to find a way to send them to another country within a week. Meanwhile, the grandfather couldn't get in touch with Seung-hee and her mother. He went to the immigration office again. The staff told him that Seung-hee had left left a video several months ago asking for her family. After watching the video, the grandfather was overcome with tears. He finally realized that Seung-hee and her mother had been searching for their family. After learning the truth, the grandfather used his connections to do everything in his power to track down his family. Meanwhile, Seung-hee's family was being held captive in an entertainment venue. They forced Seung-hee to work as a prostitute. Yeon-ae was beaten severely by the criminals while trying to protect her daughter. One day, Mijin suddenly reappeared. She told her adoptive mother that she had seen her biological father in Seoul. Now her biological father had gone to China. She wanted Seung-hee to take her mother to China to find her father. Yeon-ae agreed immediately. However, Seung-hee became suspicious of Mijin's actions. After she left, Seung-hee told her mother how she had found Mijin. This was a suspicious point. Ru-soon also felt something was off. When he had gone to Yujin's house to play, he had seen the ring on his grandmother's hand in his grandfather's room. Later, he had lost the ring. Mijin had warned him not to tell anyone about the ring. The reason the ring had been found in the rental house was because Yujin had given it to Mijin. She had then brought it back. After hearing his nephew's words, Seung-hee immediately connected the dots and realized that the person who attacked her mother in the park and stole the ring must have been Mijin. At that moment, Yeon-ae finally understood. Seung-hee also realized that all of this was Mijin's doing. If that was the case, their current situation was very dangerous. Seung-hee then took her mother and nephew and fled. She swore that she would do whatever it took to see her grandfather. Unexpectedly, the three of them were discovered by the bad guys. As soon as they escaped, they begged desperately that the bad guys refused to listen to them. They were about to force them back to the entertainment center. Just then, several luxury cars pulled up and blocked their way. At that moment, Grandpa appeared. He called out Seung-hee's name. Finally, the two were reunited. Meanwhile, Mijin had no idea what was happening. She believed that Seung-hee's family had been sent abroad, but she never dreamed that at the entrance of the mansion, she would see Seung-hee again. Mijin finally realized the truth. Grandfather had known her identity all along. Seeing that the truth had been exposed, Mijin left the mansion with Daehoon and Yujin. She knew that as long as Daehoon was in her hands, grandfather wouldn't dare to harm her. Inside the mansion, grandfather exposed Changjae's true colors. The truth was laid bare before them. Changjae shifted all the blame onto Mijin. However, Da-ho didn't believe her. Da-ho dragged his wife to the riverbank and threatened to throw her into the river. In the end, Changjae confessed everything he had done with Mijin. Da-ho didn't forgive his wife. He told his wife to fend for herself from now on and never set foot in the house again. Meanwhile, Django finally discovered the series of evil deeds Mijin had committed during this time. Upon hearing this, Seung-hee cried tearfully in distress. It turned out that everything she had endured over the years was caused by Mijin. On the other side, Grandpa instructed Django to apply to the police for an arrest warrant for Mijin. Meanwhile, Mijin was still thinking about her grandfather's fortune. She called the director and told him to transfer the company's funds to a Swiss bank. After the transfer was complete, she promised to give the director 20 billion won. But the director harshly scolded her. It was all because of Mijin. He was now being hunted by the police. Upon hearing that he was being hunted, Mijin was terrified. Her phone would definitely be tracked by the police. She dug up the sand and buried the phone. She then used a public phone to call her grandfather. Her grandfather thought Mijin didn't know the truth. He tried to reassure her and told her to bring her father home quickly. But Mijin congratulated her grandfather on finding his granddaughter. Upon hearing this, her grandfather grew anxious. Because Daehoon was still in her hands, he asked her what she wanted. Mijin demanded that her grandfather prepare 20 billion won for her and revoke the travel ban on her. As long as her grandfather agreed to her conditions, she promised that Daehoon would be safe and that she would leave Korea with Yujin and never cause trouble again. For her son's safety, her grandfather had no choice but to agree. Mijin never expected her daughter to betray her. Yujin told Daehoon that her mother had gone mad and urged him to escape quickly. But when Mijin returned to the car, Daehoon was already gone. Having lost Daehoon, Mijin had lost her last days in the hole. She knew her doom was imminent. Meanwhile, Daehoon, who had escaped, was finally reunited with his wife and daughter with the help of a kind-hearted driver. At the same time, Changjae was being hunted by the police. Desperate, she came to beg her husband, but Da-ho told her to turn herself in. In the end, Changjae couldn't escape punishment and went to prison. Mijin, however, remained unrepentant and fled with her daughter. To survive, she sold her car for a pittance. But how long could a few 100,000 won last? When the money ran out, she and Yujin ended up begging on the streets. Mijin realized she couldn't escape the police's capture. In the end, she decided to send Mijin back to the orphanage and turn herself in. Before going to the police station, she knelt before her foster mother and Seung-hee, begging for forgiveness. Seung-hee hated her with all her heart. Mijin stated that she was willing to accept any punishment. In the end, the two women were sent to prison. Mijin was sentenced to 10 years in prison for intentional assault and fraud. Her mother-in-law was sentenced to 5 years. The two wicked women were sent to prison. To film ends here. If you're interested, please like and follow us. See you next time.